If Niccolò Machiavelli were alive today, he wouldn't be writing dusty treatises for Renaissance princes. He'd be advising CEOs, political strategists, tech founders, and maybe even social media influencers. He'd be watching the chaos of the modern world, the 24-hour news cycle, billion-dollar companies rising and collapsing overnight, wars fought with drones and disinformation. And he'd smile, because chaos was his playground, power was his obsession, and manipulation, in his eyes, wasn't a dirty trick. It was survival. Machiavelli understood something most people don't want to admit, that beneath all the polite smiles, handshakes, and lofty speeches, human beings are driven by fear, greed, envy, and ambition. He stripped away the illusions of morality to reveal the gears of power turning underneath to him. Leaders weren't saints, and the masses weren't noble. Everyone was playing a game, whether they knew it or not. And in that game, the person who saw reality clearly brutal, ruthless reality, was the person who won. But imagine him dropped into our world. He wouldn't just survive, he'd dominate. He would look at Instagram and see not selfies, but tools of influence. He would look at politics and see not campaigns, but wars fought with words. He would see billionaires racing to colonize Mars and think, these are my princes, my dukes, my tyrants. And then he'd start plotting, building a handbook not for the 16th century, but for today. List of rules that would outsmart everyone else. These rules wouldn't be gentle. They wouldn't sound nice. In fact, many would make you uncomfortable, because to play the game Machiavelli's way means letting go of the illusions that most people cling to. It means accepting that kindness doesn't always win, that honesty can be a liability, and that morality is often nothing more than a mask. His rules were never about being liked. They were about being feared, respected, untouchable. So let's step into his world, as if he were whispering in our ear right now. Imagine you're sitting in a dimly lit study. The candles flicker. Machiavelli leans forward, his eyes sharp, his voice calm but relentless. He doesn't waste time. He doesn't flatter you. He lays out the truth, and truth, as he sees it, is power. The first lesson he'd teach is that appearance always outweighs reality. People judge what they see, not what is. A modern Machiavelli would say, stop worrying about what you actually are and start focusing on how you are perceived. The CEO doesn't need to know everything about technology. He just needs to look like a visionary. The politician doesn't need to keep promises. She just needs to look like she cares. The influencer doesn't need a perfect life. They just need to look like they have one perception is stronger than truth. And the one who controls the story controls the crowd. But perception alone isn't enough. Machiavelli knew that fear is more reliable than love. People's love is fickle. It disappears the moment you disappoint them. Fear, though, anchors loyalty in a way affection never could. Translate that into today's world. The boss who is only friendly may be ignored, but the boss who can fire you commands your attention. The political leader who tries to please everyone ends up pleasing no one. But the one who makes people afraid of the consequences of disobedience stays in power. In business, in politics, even in personal relationships. Fear, when carefully balanced, becomes a weapon sharper than affection. He would caution, though, against cruelty without strategy. Brutality for its own sake destroys rulers. But calculated fear? That's something else. Think of tech monopolies that crush competitors with lawsuits and still have customers lining up for the next product. That's not just business. That's power through fear. Machiavelli would also remind us that loyalty is fragile. Promises, friendships, alliances, they're useful, but temporary. People will betray you if it benefits them. The only way to prevent betrayal is to make sure betrayal costs them more than loyalty does. If you run a company, that means making your employees feel they'll lose everything if they walk away. If you're in politics, it means binding your allies so tightly to your success that abandoning you destroys them too. In personal life, it means knowing who would stand by you when things fall apart and who would sell you. Out the moment it's convenient, another rule he'd hammer into your mind is never to be predictable. If people can anticipate your every move, they can control you. The trick is to keep them guessing, sometimes ruthless, sometimes generous, sometimes silent, sometimes loud. Confusion is a shield. Uncertainty makes people hesitate. Think of the leaders today who thrive on unpredictability. They keep opponents nervous, the media obsessed, and supporters hanging on every word, never knowing what comes next. That's not chaos. That's strategy. Machiavelli wouldn't just focus on politics, he'd look at social media. The new battlefield of reputation here. The masses can elevate or destroy someone overnight. And he'd say, never underestimate the mob. Control them with symbols, not logic. Give them something to believe in. An image, a slogan, a face. He understood that people rarely think deeply. They follow emotions. They follow spectacle, and today's spectacle is everywhere. Viral videos, hashtags, trends. If you want power now, you don't give people truth. You give them a story. Repeat it until it becomes truth, and then he'd lean closer, lowering his voice, warning you. Trust no one completely. Even your closest allies have their own ambitions. Betrayal often comes from those nearest to you. History proved it in his time. Modern politics and business prove it again and again. That's why he would advise building layers of protection, secrets, leverage, information that can ruin someone if they turn against you. Knowledge is the invisible dagger you always keep hidden. Head point to the importance of adaptability. The world changes faster than ever. Empires of the past rose and fell over centuries. But today, corporations can rise and collapse within a decade. Adaptability isn't just useful. It's survival, Machiavelli would say. Cling to tradition and you're dead. Reinvent yourself as the times demand. A leader who resists change is swept away. The one who bends with it thrives, and he'd never stop reminding you of this. Morality is a mask. Leaders wear it when it serves them, and remove it when it doesn't. If honesty helps, be honest. If deception works better, deceive. The public loves a moral leader, but what they love more is success. If you deliver results, they forgive almost anything. Think of the scandals powerful people have survived, not because they were innocent, but because they remained useful, influential, or entertaining. Machiavelli would nod and say, exactly. Use morality as a costume, not a cage. Now, he'd also warn against wasting energy on battles that don't matter. Don't fight every critic. Don't strike every enemy. Save your power for the battles that shape your future. A modern Machiavelli would look at social media outrage storms and laugh. He'd say, let them scream. Let them tire themselves out. Choose your wars carefully. And when you strike, make it decisive. Another timeless lesson. Never outshine the master in workplaces, in politics, even in families. People with authority hate being overshadowed. If you're too good, too talented, too admired, you make those above you insecure, and insecurity breeds destruction. Machiavelli would tell you to hide your brilliance until the time is right, to let others believe they are in control, while you quietly build influence in the shadows. That's how you rise without being noticed, until it's too late for anyone to stop you. Would also insist that power is never static. You're either gaining it or losing it. That means constant vigilance, constant maneuvering. The moment you relax, someone else takes your place. To Machiavelli, complacency was death. In the Renaissance, a prince who stopped scheming was overthrown. Today, a CEO who stops innovating is replaced. A politician who stops campaigning is forgotten. Power is a flame. You have to keep feeding it, or it burns out. Machiavelli's worldview wasn't cynical for the sake of it. It was survivalist. He saw people as they were, not as they pretended to be, and that's why his rules still sting today. They force us to admit the ugly truth that many of the things we call virtues, kindness, honesty, humility, can be dangerous if used without caution. They leave you exposed in a world where others are sharpening knives. But he'd also say, don't throw those virtues away entirely, use them when they serve you. Sometimes kindness is the perfect disguise. Sometimes honesty disarms suspicion. Sometimes humility makes people underestimate you, giving you the perfect chance to strike. The trick is control. You control the mask. You control when to put it on and when to take it off. Never let anyone else decide that for you. By now, if you were still sitting in that flickering study with him, you'd feel uneasy, because every lesson cuts deeper than the last. They're not comforting. They're not meant to be. They meant to prepare you for war, the invisible war happening all around you. Every day at work, in politics, online, even in your personal relationships. Everyone wants something. Everyone is maneuvering. Most people just aren't aware of it. But if you are, if you follow his rules, you're already 2 steps ahead. And Machiavelli would smirk at that, because for him, the game never ended. Machiavelli would tell you that power is not inherited. Even if you are born into it, it must be taken, held, and constantly defended. The moment you think power belongs to you by right, you're already vulnerable in his world. Dukes and princes who assumed their crowns were secure were usually the first to be betrayed, poisoned, or overthrown in ours. CEOs who assume their companies are too big to fail end up as case studies in arrogance. Politicians who think their popularity will last forever find themselves forgotten within a year. Nothing in power is permanent. Everything is rented. And the rent is due every day. That is why Machiavelli insisted that decisive action is more valuable than hesitation. He didn't believe in endless deliberation. He believed in striking first, striking fast, and striking with confidence. Today's world, that means the politician who sets the narrative before opponents can respond. It means the business founder who launches boldly before competitors have even finished planning. It means the social media creator who posts relentlessly, flooding the conversation so that no one else can dominate it. Machiavelli would warn that hesitation is death, because in the time you wait, someone else is plotting, moving, seizing what should have been yours. He would also remind you that generosity, if misused, can be fatal. Leaders who give too much too often are seen not as kind, but as weak. In his own writings, Machiavelli cautioned that a ruler who spends lavishly to win affection soon runs out of resources and is despised when he can no longer provide. In modern terms, that lesson translates to leaders who hand out endless promises, discounts, or favors until their authority collapses. He'd say, be generous rarely, strategically, when it buys loyalty that matters. Never confuse generosity with leadership. If you give constantly, people stop respecting the gift. But if you give carefully, each gesture feels priceless at the same time. He would advise mastering the art of deception. Machiavelli never denied that lying was sometimes necessary. In fact, he encouraged it. To him, honesty was not a virtue in itself. It was a tool, and like all tools, it had its moment. In politics, in business, in personal dealings, the leader who always tells the truth is predictable, and predictability is weakness. Think about it. The politician who promises complete transparency is usually eaten alive by the media. The company that reveals all its strategies is quickly copied by competitors. The person who always says exactly what they feel is often isolated, mocked, or betrayed. Machiavelli would argue that a carefully chosen lie, one that advances your position, is not a sin, it's a necessity. But he would be quick to add that lies must be believable. Empty promises without action destroy reputations. Deception, to be effective, must be built on a foundation of truth. The best lies are half-truths, framed to manipulate perception. Modern advertising thrives on this principle. Political campaigns are built on it. Social media personas are practically defined by it. Machiavelli would smile at that and call it proof of his relevance. Another truth he'd stress is that conflict is not always dangerous. In fact, sometimes it is essential. Leaders who avoid all conflict appear cowardly, but leaders who pick the right battles inspire respect. Consider how brands today create rivalries to dominate headlines, or how politicians amplify enemies to keep their supporters united. Machiavelli understood that people rally more fiercely against a common enemy than they do around vague ideals. An enemy sharpens identity, strengthens loyalty, and creates urgency. He would advise you never to fear having enemies, fear being ignored. He would also teach the value of scapegoats. When things go wrong, and they always do, the wise leader finds someone else to blame. In his time, princes sacrificed ministers or generals. Today, CEOs dismiss executives during scandals. Politicians point to foreign powers, bureaucrats, or previous administrations. The public rarely wants truth. They want someone to hold responsible. Machiavelli's genius was in recognizing that responsibility is a weapon, and it can be shifted, manipulated, reassigned. To survive, you must know when to take credit and when to deflect blame. Control of information would be another pillar of his modern playbook. In the Renaissance, information was power because so few had access to it. In the digital age, the flood of information is overwhelming, and power belongs to those who can shape it. Machiavelli would immediately grasp the value of algorithms, echo chambers, and media spin. He would see the viral video not as entertainment, but as propaganda. He would understand that in an era of endless noise, the person who controls the loudest voice controls the truth, and he would whisper to you, never let others tell your story. Tell it yourself, relentlessly, until it drowns out all others. But perhaps one of his most unsettling lessons would be about loyalty among the masses. He knew that ordinary people care less about justice, and they do about stability. In Florence, citizens forgave cruelty if it meant order in the streets. Today, voters overlook corruption if they believe their lives will improve. Customers ignore abusive corporate practices if the product remains convenient. Machiavelli would call this the eternal truth of governance. People care about their own security. First, appeal to that, and they will follow you, even against their better judgment. He would also remind you that symbols often matter more than substance. A flag, a logo, a catchphrase, these things inspire more loyalty than policies or plans. Modern politics thrives on this principle. So does marketing. The masses love symbols because they are simple, emotional, and memorable. Machiavelli would advise you to create your own symbols, to embody them so fully that people associate you with them forever. That way, even when you fail, the symbol survives. And symbols, unlike human beings, do not age, betray, or die. Another crucial rule he'd whisper is this: never reveal the full extent of your power. If people know exactly what you are capable of, they can prepare for it. Keep some strength hidden. Let them underestimate you. Let them believe they know your limits, only to discover, too late, that you had more to give. In his day, princes often kept armies in reserve, striking with unexpected force. Today, that same principle applies to business negotiations, political campaigns, even personal rivalries. Never show all your cards. Keep the trump hidden until the decisive moment. Machiavelli would not forget the importance of alliances, but he'd tell you to treat them as tools, not friendships. Alliances exist to be used, not cherished. They are temporary, shifting with the winds of ambition. To rely on them blindly is suicide. To use them strategically is brilliance. He would point to modern coalitions in politics, corporate partnerships, or even social cliques as examples of alliances that hold only as long as they serve both sides, and he'd remind you that when the day comes to break them, do so quickly, ruthlessly, without apologies still, even in all this darkness. Machiavelli understood the value of patience. Not everything can be seized at once. Some power must be built slowly, carefully, step by step. He'd caution you against greed, against lunging too far too soon. Many princes destroyed themselves by reaching beyond their grasp. Today, many entrepreneurs, influencers, or politicians burn out by chasing everything at once. Machiavelli would say, pace yourself. Ambition is fire. If it burns too hot, it consumes you. If it burns too low, it dies. But if you control it, it lights the world. I'd also tell you to study your enemies more carefully than your friends. Friends flatter you, enemies reveal your weaknesses. Friends tell you what you want to hear. Enemies show you where you can be destroyed. In every insult, every attack, every act of opposition lies information, and information is power. A wise leader never ignores it. And then, perhaps with a cruel smile, Machiavelli would deliver one of his harshest truths. People do not want freedom as much as they cling. They want safety, prosperity, and certainty. Freedom, if it threatens those things, becomes a burden. Leaders who promise freedom often fail. Leaders who promise safety succeed. In modern politics, this plays out in policies that limit liberty but increase security, and people accept them willingly. Machiavelli would call it proof of human nature. When forced to choose, most people prefer comfort to freedom. Above all, he would insist that survival is the highest law. Everything else, morality, reputation, even loyalty, comes second. A dead ruler cannot lead. A ruined company cannot inspire. A silenced voice cannot influence. Survival is the foundation of all power. From that foundation, anything is possible. Without it, nothing matters. Imagine him saying these things to you, his eyes sharp, his tone unyielding. He would not try to comfort you. He would not soften the edges of his lessons, because in his world, comfort was a lie, and only those who embraced the hard truth could endure. And as you listened, part of you would recoil, because his rules sound ruthless, manipulative, even cruel. But another part of you, quieter, hidden, would recognize their truth. You've seen them in action. You've watched the ruthless succeed, where the virtuous failed. You've seen deception outlast honesty, fear outlast love, spectacle outlast reason. You know, deep down, that his rules are not fantasies. They are the blueprint of the world as it really is. And so, in this imagined study, you would sit silently as Machiavelli finished his glass of wine, leaned back, and gave you a final warning. The game never ends. The moment you think it does, the moment you rest, someone sharper, hungrier, more ruthless takes everything from you. Learn the rules, use them, or be used by those who already have. If Niccolò Machiavelli were alive in the 21st century, he wouldn't sit in libraries, waiting to be studied. He'd be moving through the corridors of influence, unassuming but relentless, his mind dissecting every smile, every handshake, every carefully worded press release. He would see the world not as a stage of isolated players, but as a chessboard where every pawn, knight and queen can be bent to his advantage. And in this final stretch of his rules, the mask comes off completely here. Here, he wouldn't just describe the game, he'd show you how to play it. Step by step, in our world, he would begin with politics, the arena closest to his heart. To Machiavelli, politics was never about policies or principles. It was about power and survival. Drop him into today's political chaos, and he would instantly recognize the patterns. Candidates who promise too much and deliver too little are forgotten. Those who master spectacle, who create images that linger in the minds of millions, rise. He would whisper that debates don't matter nearly as much as sound bites. A candidate who delivers a single unforgettable phrase can shape the narrative for years, while the one who drones on about policy fades into dust. Machiavelli would point to the rise of populism and say, "Of course, it's nothing new. The people want to believe in strength, in symbols, in certainty. If that certainty requires exaggeration, lies, or scapegoats, so be it." He would encourage leaders not to waste time explaining themselves to critics. Instead, they should hammer their message relentlessly, drowning opposition in repetition until truth bends to perception. He'd admire the leaders who provoke outrage intentionally, knowing that every scandal only keeps their names alive, feeding the fire of attention. For Machiavelli, the true danger in politics is not hatred, it is indifference. Then he would turn to business, the battlefield of modern princes. He would study Silicon Valley and Wall Street, the way he once studied Florence and Rome. The same patterns emerge. Empires rise, fortunes shift, rivals scheme. He would see how billionaires cultivate mythologies around themselves. The genius founder, the visionary CEO, the rebel innovator. He would nod approvingly, because myth is power. People don't just buy products, they buy the stories behind them. Apple sells more than phones. It sells identity. Tesla sells more than cars. It sells the future, Machiavelli would say. This is not commerce, this is rulership. And the leader who masters narrative rules, both market and mindy, would advise entrepreneurs never to aim for fairness in competition. Fairness is for losers. True power lies in crushing rivals so completely they cannot recover, acquire them, bankrupt them, smear them, out-innovate them, whatever the method, ensure they never rise again. Mercy, he would warn, creates tomorrow's enemies, decisive. Destruction ensures tomorrow's safety, and yet, he would also caution against appearing too ruthless. Always cloak your conquest in the language of progress. Say you are creating opportunity or expanding innovation. Let your victims scream while the world applauds your vision. And then he would look at social media, the new empire of human attention. If politics and business are gains of power, then platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter are the weapons. Machiavelli would marvel at them. But he would also see the danger. Never before has reputation been so fragile, so easily destroyed. One viral moment can undo years of effort. But he would not despair. He would see opportunity, because just as quickly as someone can be destroyed, they can be built. Machiavelli would teach you to manipulate the spectacle. Post not what is true, but what is effective. Share not your thoughts, but your image. Control the angles, the lighting, the words. He would remind you that most people do not want complexity. They want simplicity, symbols, faces to cheer or despise. Give them drama, give them conflict, give them stories they cannot stop watching. He'd say, don't fight the mob, lead it, direct its fury where you want it to go. Become the one they cannot look away from, whether in admiration or disgust. But he'd warn you of something deeper. In a world of constant noise, silence can be a weapon. The influencer who disappears creates hunger. The politician who holds back a statement builds suspense. The CEO who refuses to comment makes headlines with absence. Alone, Machiavelli knew that power often rests not in what is said, but in what is withheld. Mystery unsettles people. It forces them to imagine, to speculate, to obsess. An obsession is power. He would also apply his rules to personal life, because power games are not limited to thrones and boardrooms. In families, friendships, and relationships, the same patterns emerge. He would tell you never to reveal your vulnerabilities too easily, for they will be used against you. He would remind you that charm is more effective than confrontation, that seduction is often stronger than argument. He'd advise that in every circle, whether at work, among friends, or in love, you must be the one others look to, the one whose approval or disapproval carries weight. This is not arrogance. It is positioning, and positioning is survival. Perhaps his harshest lesson for personal life would be this: do not mistake affection for loyalty. The friend who swears they would never betray you, will betray you if the cost of loyalty becomes too high. The partner who promises eternal devotion may waver when temptation strikes. People are loyal only to themselves and to what they stand to gain. To Machiavelli, love is beautiful, but fragile. Fear, respect, and dependence, those are the bonds that last in the workplace. He would be ruthless. He'd tell you that climbing the ladder is not about hard work alone. It is about perception, alliances, timing. Do not simply be competent. Be seen as indispensable. Do not just complete tasks. Make others believe only you can complete them. Never outshine your boss, but never let your peers overshadow you. Build quiet networks of influence. People who owe you favors. People who fear crossing you in time. When the opportunity arises, move quickly. Promotion is not given, it is taken. And yet, through all of this, he would caution you to never believe your own myth. Power intoxicates. It convinces leaders that they are untouchable. Machiavelli saw this arrogance destroy kings and generals. In today's world, he would point to celebrities who fell to scandal because they believed the rules no longer applied to them. He'd warn that the higher you climb, the more dangerous the fall. Always remember that enemies are waiting. Watching pride is the poison of power. Humility, not genuine, but strategic humility, is the antidote. He would also insist on adaptability. In the Renaissance, rulers fell because they could not change with the times. In our era, change is constant. The company that dominates today may collapse tomorrow. The influencer who trends this week may be irrelevant next week. Machiavelli would say, reinvent yourself before others reinvent you. Change your strategies, your alliances, even your image as the world demands. Those who cling to the past, die with it then. With a sharper tone, he'd tell you to master fear within yourself. Leaders who cannot control their own fear are eaten alive. Anxiety, hesitation, cowardice, these are weaknesses your enemies will smell instantly. But the one who projects calm, even in crisis, appears invincible. The projection is often enough to win. A trembling leader invites rebellion. A calm leader inspires confidence. Even if the world is burning, Machiavelli would demand that you master your face, your posture, your tone, until fear itself bows to you. And perhaps his most enduring lesson for our world would be about legacy. For Machiavelli, power was not just about the present moment. It was about how history remembers you. Princes who ruled wisely but left no mark were forgotten. Those who shaped the destiny of nations were remembered, even in infamy. Today, legacy is built not only through history books, but through digital footprints, through the archives of the internet, through the stories people tell long after you are gone. Machiavelli would tell you to think constantly about what survives you, because power that dies with you is wasted. Power that echoes for centuries is eternally. He would end his rules not with comfort, but with challenge. He would remind you that most people do not play the game at all. They stumble through life, blind to the forces shaping them, unaware of the strings pulling them. They are pawns, moved and sacrificed without ever realizing it. He would ask you, do you want to be a pawn or the player moving the pieces? The choice, he would say, is yours. But the game never ends. And with that, Machiavelli would stand, straighten his coat, and leave you in silence. The candles would flicker lower, the room would feel colder, and you would know, with a sharp certainty, that his voice will echo every time you see a politician on TV, every time a CEO makes headlines, every time a scandal explodes online, because his rules are not relics. They are reality. He would outsmart everyone today, not because he invented the game, but because he was the first to describe it without illusions. And now, he has handed it to you. What you do with it will decide whether you are forgotten like the masses, or remembered like the few who learned to rule them. If Machiavelli were here now, walking through the streets of New York, or London, or Beijing, he wouldn't marvel at the skyscrapers, or the flashing billboards. He would marvel at how little human nature had changed behind every piece of technology. Behind every empire and institution, he would see the same hunger, the same envy, the same fear. He would laugh, perhaps because the world believes itself modern, enlightened, advanced, but the game is the same. Only the board is changed in this stage of his lessons. Machiavelli would not waste time on abstractions. He would drag you into the dirt of real situations, the kinds of battles you might face if you want to rise. He would not comfort you with ideals. He would sharpen you with scenario stake. For example, global politics nations in Machiavelli's eyes are no different from princes. They seek dominance, resources, survival. He would look at the tensions between superpowers and see not morality, but maneuvering. He would say, "The wise nation does not reveal all of its strength. It creates alliances, but never trusts them fully. It spreads disinformation to confuse enemies. It strikes suddenly, when rivals are weakest, then retreats behind words of peace." He would argue that the greatest danger for a country is not aggression but complacency, believing the world respects them when in truth, the world respects only their ability to harm. And if Machiavelli were advising modern leaders, he would be blunt. Do not expect loyalty from allies. Expect self-interest. Do not rely on treaties. Rely on leverage. Do not assume your morality will protect you. Assume only that strength, cunning, and spectacle will. If he lived to watch the endless churn of international news summits, sanctions, cyber attacks, he would whisper, "It is all the prince rewritten, but on a global stage now." Shift from nations to corporations. Imagine Machiavelli advising a tech giant like Apple, Google, or Amazon, he would say. Never let competitors breathe, acquire them early, crush them quickly, and always wrap your domination in the cloak of serving the customer. He would admire how corporations use sleek branding, charismatic spokespeople, and carefully timed innovations to maintain control. Even when scandals erupt, he would say, "Here is proof that the mask matters more than the face. Customers will forgive almost anything if you give them beauty, convenience, or the illusion of progress." But he would also warn corporations of arrogance. Too many rulers, ancient and modern, believed themselves untouchable. Too many empires rotted from within because they stopped fearing their rivals. Machiavelli would point to history, Rome, Florence, Byzantium, and remind you that every empire collapses the clever leader, prepares for collapse before it comes. He reinvents, he pivots, he shifts the ground beneath his feet before others can pull it away. That, Machiavelli would say, is the secret not only of survival, but of dominance across centuries. Then he would take you to the battlefield of the digital age. Information Machiavelli, who once manipulated rumors in Florence, would see social media as the greatest weapon ever created. He would not be horrified by fake news. He would be impressed to him. Disinformation is not a corruption of politics. It is politics. He would advise modern rulers and corporations alike to master the algorithm, to seed doubt, to weaponize narrative truth. He would remind you, has always been a luxury perception. Is the currency of power. Control what people believe, and you control their choices, their votes, their purchases, even their anger, and he would warn you. The battle is not fought with facts. It is fought with feelings. Fear spreads faster than evidence. Hope lingers longer than statistics. Outrage generates more loyalty than reason. The successful manipulator knows this instinctively. If you want to lead, don't waste time arguing facts shape emotions. That is the battlefield where victory is won. Machiavelli would also analyze celebrity culture, because to him, celebrities are nothing less than modern-day princes. They rule not by armies, but by attention. They live and die by spectacle. He would say, study them. For their rise and fall reveals everything about power. The celebrity who controls their image carefully, who manipulates scandal into sympathy, who weaponizes outrage into loyalty. This one thrives. The celebrity who believes their fame is permanent, who fails to adapt, who trusts their fans blindly. This one is destroyed. But Machiavelli would not stop at celebrities. He would look at ordinary people, the office worker, the student, the aspiring creator, and say, the same rules apply your kingdom. May be smaller, but the game is the same in every workplace. There are rivals, alliances, betrayals. In every classroom, there are hierarchies of popularity, whispers of envy, struggles for influence. He would argue that ignoring the game doesn't make it disappear. It only makes you a pawn in someone else's to him. The choice is simple. Play consciously or be played unconsciously. And here, Machiavelli would. Grow harsher. He would tell you that compassion, kindness, and honesty are not useless, but they are dangerous when used without strategy. A kind ruler who cannot inspire fear will be overthrown. An honest CEO who reveals too much will be destroyed. A compassionate politician who refuses to make enemies will be devoured by them. Yet, he would add, kindness, honesty, and compassion can also be masks, powerful ones. They can disarm suspicion, win all eyes, and hide ambition. The key is control. Never let virtue control. You must control virtue. He would illustrate this with a warning about forgiveness. Many rulers throughout history fell because they forgave too easily. Mercy is admired, but only when it strengthens your image. Mercy that makes you look weak is poison. Forgive rarely. Machiavelli would say, and only when forgiveness enhances your authority. Otherwise, strike swiftly and make the punishment unforgettable. In private life, too, he would drive the lesson home. Do not reveal everything about yourself. Mystery is armor. People cannot betray what they do not know. Keep secrets, guard leverage, cultivate ambiguity. He would remind you that trust is currency. Spend it carefully, hoard it when you must, and above all, remember that betrayal comes from those closest to you, never from strangers. By now, as you sat listening to him, your stomach would twist, because these rules, though dark, ring with truth. You've seen them in action. You've watched the ruthless rise while the virtuous sink you. We've seen corporations forgiven for crimes because their products are. Beloved, you've seen politicians survive scandals because their supporters fear their enemies more. You've watched influencers craft perfect illusions while their real lives collapse. Machiavelli would nod at your unease and say, this is not corruption. This is reality.